Hello, today's video is going to be my November wrap up and I'm going to jump straight into it with the first book that I finished this month, which was Thunderhead by Neil Shusterman. This is the second book in the Arc of the Scythe series, which I'm fairly sure is going to be a trilogy. The first book was Scythe, which I finished in the month of October. I've done a full spoiler-free review and spoiler-filled chat for both Scythe and Thunderhead, so I'll link that up there if you want to check that out. I'm not going to tell you what Thunderhead is about because of course it's a sequel, and so if you haven't read Scythe that would be spoilers, but essentially the Arc of the Scythe is set in this utopian future of the human race where all forms of death have been eradicated and people can no longer die of natural causes. If you reach an age and you decide you don't want to be that age anymore, you want to be younger, you can reset your age back down to any age over the age of 21. Also, if you die for any reason, because of an accident or because you're an adrenaline junkie and want to jump off the top of a tall building, then you will be whisked away to a revival centre and revived. And so there is this section of society called the Scythedom, which is in place to effect some population control. And there's a lot of internal politics that goes on about how gleaning, that's what it's called when a scythe kills someone, and that's the only way that someone can properly and permanently die. And there's lots of politics around how gleaning should be done and the morals that come along with that. So, like I say, I've done a full review video of these books, but I absolutely loved both of them. Thunderhead not quite as much as Scythe because it is a little bit more slower paced and it's more based on setting up for the next book was the feeling that I got, but I still really enjoyed it and it was still a solid 4.5 stars for me. Definitely recommend. The next book that I read, I'm actually going to talk about the next 3 books that I read at the same time because they're in the same series, and it's the 3 Dark Crowns series by Kendar Blake. So we've got 3 Dark Crowns, which is book 1, 1 Dark Throne, which is book 2, then we've got the Queens of Fenburn, which is a bind up of the 2 novellas in the series, which are The Young Queens and The Oracle Queen. So I finished all of these this month, and as I'm filming this, it's the 2nd of December right now, and 2 Dark Reigns is the 3rd book in this series. There's going to be one more after this, which isn't out yet. I'm about halfway through this one now. I was hoping that I would be able to finish it in November, but unfortunately I didn't. So I'm going to talk about these 3 together because I clearly can't tell you too much about 1 Dark Throne and the Queens of Fenburn because of spoilers, but essentially 3 Dark Crowns follows 3 sisters, they're triplets, and they are potential queens of the island of Fenburn, and they live together until they're 6 years old, and then they are separated and raised by the clans that correspond to their type of magic. So you have elemental magic, which is controlling of the elements. There is poisoner magic, which is where people can consume any poison and remain unharmed, and they use those gifts to poison other people. And there's the naturalist magic, which is a magic that surrounds nature, as the name would suggest, predominantly animals, and naturalists have what's called familiars, so they create a bond with one specific animal and that animal becomes their familiar. There are other types of magic. There's war magic, which, as the name suggests, gives people a predisposition to be very good at war and weaponry and that sort of thing. And then there's oracle magic, which is where a person has visions of the future. So And then there's low magic, and I'm not going to go into that because spoilers, but that is a different type, another kind of magic that's in this series. And those sisters, like I said, are separated at the age of 6 and go off to live with their respective magic clans to be raised, because eventually one of them will become queen of Fenburn, but the way that one becomes queen is by killing her sisters. And so I went into this series feeling like it would be sort of almost like the Hunger Games, and that's not the case. That's not the case at all. This is not a brutal series whatsoever. If you're expecting a lot of brutality and if that's what you're looking for, this isn't the series for you. I'm struggling with it a bit. There's the writing style is very unusual. It's written in third person but present tense narrative, which is just a little bit jarring for me, and you don't get as much internal narrative as I would usually like, which means that to me at least, the characters don't seem as deep as they would be when you get more internal narrative. And I'm very much a character-driven reader rather than a plot-driven reader. But even having said that, it's not like the plot is massively like moving the story forward in these books, in my opinion. I do still like them, but they are a little slow, so know that going in. They aren't as brutal as the synopsis would suggest, so know that going in. And the writing style is a little different, so know that going in. I am enjoying them. I think I'm giving them about 3 stars each. If you're wary of novellas, I would say it's still worth reading The Queens of Fenburn, particularly The Oracle Queen, because The Oracle Queen, which is the second novella in this bind-up, is about one of the past queens, so it gives you a little bit more history about the island, and that's really interesting. So I definitely would recommend checking this one out, but whether or not you decide to pick up the series, I would base that on whether or not you're okay with slow stories, strange writing styles, and things being a little bit more merry than the brutality I was expecting going into this. So I don't know what that says about me, but I kind of wish it was a little bit more vicious than it is. So yeah. The next book that I read was Volume 1 of The Full Metal Alchemist by Hiromu Arakawa. I've only read Volume 1, so it's a little bit difficult for me to tell you what the plot is about more generally, but the basic overview is that we follow these 2 alchemists. One of them is the Full Metal Alchemist, and they tried to use alchemy to bring their dead mother back from the dead, and it went horribly wrong and resulted in one of them losing his leg and the other losing his whole body. And so the one who lost a leg gives up an arm so that his brother's body or soul can be preserved in a suit of armour. And this story follows those brothers as they try to find a way to restore themselves to the men that they once were. And this is manga, as you can probably tell, and so it's a little bit difficult for me to get into just because I've never read manga before. So the narrative isn't as smooth, so you'll jump from one scene to the next, and you'll be expected to fill in some of the gaps, which is fine. It's easy to follow, but when you've never read it before, it's a little bit like, oh, I feel like I'm missing something, and I'm not. It's not because I've skipped a page or anything, it's just because this kind of format of book, it has to do that, because otherwise they'd be thousands and thousands and thousands of pages long, and the point is that these are supposed to be slightly quicker reads. So I've only read Volume 1, but I am going to be continuing. This is a bind up of volumes 1 to 3 and I'm on volume 2 now, and I am really enjoying them, and I think that this is good when I tend to binge read at the weekends, and sometimes I can be a bit fatigued with whatever book that I am reading, so it'll be nice to have this as something to dip in and out of as and when necessary. And the last book that I read this month was Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. Side note, this isn't the order I read them in. If you have any interest in the order that I read them in, head on over to my Goodreads, I'll have that linked below. Skyward by Brandon Sanderson, I spoke about this one in my November Fairy Loot unboxing, and I gave a pretty full review of this book there because I had already read it when I received my Fairy Loot box. But essentially what this one is about is it follows a girl named Spencer who lives on a planet with the rest of the human race, where the human race are hiding underground because the planet is under attack by a species called the Krell, and there is an air force that are defending the human race from these Krell, and Spencer desperately wants to be a member of this air force. It's her lifelong dream. The roadblock in her way, however, is the fact that her father was in the air force, but he broke rank and left his team behind while in the midst of a battle and was shot down for it and is branded a coward, and so she is branded a coward as well, and so the chances of her being accepted into pilot school are slim to none. But Spencer is determined and we follow her journey. She's a really enjoyable character. This is a young adult novel, so it's a little bit more on the basic side of Sanderson's writing, but still really enjoyable. I really loved reading this book. I cannot wait for the next one, and if you'd like any more detail, I will link that review / Fairy Loot unboxing up above. And that is it. Those are all the books that I read in the month of November. Not as many as I perhaps would have liked. Like I said, I had a little bit of trouble with the 3 Dark Crowns series, and I think that was slowing me down slightly. So hopefully December will be a bit of a better month for reading. But thank you so much for watching. If you like this video and want to see more like this from me, then do think about hitting that subscribe button. I'd be so grateful. And I hope to see you here again soon. Bye!